Welcome to College Football Roundtable, your source for college football coverage, including major storylines,
playoffs,
can't miss game previews, and picks each week. Join your hosts, Dan, Rob, and Jordan at the Roundtable for a show unlike anything else. As for Football presents the College Football Roundtable.
Get deeper into the college football schedule. Welcome back, Trash Talkers, to the College Football Roundtable, or if you prefer, you can just call it Ring Knocker Radio. We call it two O's and an NCO. We wish we had two Joes. Hey, sometimes, because he hasn't been on here for a couple of weeks, so if we doubled him up, maybe we could get a little bit more feedback. But,
I was going to say, I bet you wish you had one that would show up on time, but I keep clicking the wrong link on StreamYard, and it says our session ended. I was like, hey, this isn't the room.
Yeah, this is pretty much how it rolls, man. Like, look, we're gonna have you show up 15 minutes early. We're gonna give you the squad leader backup, so now you got to show up 6 hours early. Anyway, welcome back, Trash Talkers. This is Ring Knocker Radio. I'm your host, Rob, in the military center of the universe in Fayetteville, North Carolina. We got Dano Ikebesa calling out of coastal Connecticut, and Trigger Joe is in the home of the Big House. How are we doing today, guys? And what did you guys end up watching this weekend? Joe, how about you?
Good. Michigan, there's something funny going on Saturday. Some of the big boys didn't show up. Michigan, they look like a team that turned the ball over 3 times, and they haven't done that yet this season. Matter of fact, J.J. McCarthy threw half as many picks as he had incompletions in the game. So, hey, different circumstances, different challenges. That's kind of why they lost to TCU last year. They threw 2 pick sixes, and JJ McCarthy isn't a great quarterback yet, but he's been a very good game manager. And when he doesn't manage the game well, they look human. So that and Florida State, BC, what a game!
Yeah,
and the most underrated game of the week, in my opinion, K-State and Mizzou, 61-yard field goal to end it. I mean, that was some college football dreams there. And then Colorado State was a great game.
Yeah, like that one's brutal. That was a brutal game. And we'll talk about that one a little bit later. But Dana, how about you? What'd you end up watching?
My wife went on like a women's retreat over the weekend, so I did nothing but watch college football. I must have seen at least part of 15 different games. All the Service Academy games, UConn losing to FIU, UMass losing to EMU, K-State and Mizzou, South Carolina at Bama. I'm sorry, South Carolina at Georgia. Bama's near suicide against South Florida. Tennessee, like, imploding in the swamp. Honestly, outside of the Army game, it was freaking miserable for college weekend for all the teams that I follow. Syracuse looked good against Purdue, but, it was like failure after failure for teams that I actually watch.
Yeah. Well, for me, I watched all 3 service academies. Again, they were spaced out, which was kind of nice, except for the Air Force and the Army game. Navy looked human. Stupid penalty cost in the game. Air Force, I don't know if it was that Air Force was that good or Utah State was that bad. That game was atrocious if you're a Utah State fan, and I'll leave it there. Peeked in on the Big Ten schedule, of course, and then I have to admit, of the games that were played this weekend, the best ones were the Rocky Mountain Showdown and the Backyard Brawl, because, like, if you watch that Colorado game, like, it was worth staying up late just because of the conclusion. And I think that was a tremendous opportunity to watch a great football team. And like I said, I don't think at any stretch of the imagination that we're going to be unrealistic and say that Colorado is going to run the table in the Pac-12, but I think they're going to do pretty doggone good. I think they'll be respectable this season.
Yeah, that hot air balloon's going to lose a little bit of altitude this weekend going into Oregon. I think they're going to come back down to earth a touch. And in your favorite category, I think line play is going to be the concern.
Yeah.
Keeping your quarterback off his butt when you get into big time games.
Yeah. I mean, Shedeur Sanders has been, an escape artist, and that's one of the things that they've been talking about. But he's also been sacked 11 times. Like, he's been sacked greater than any other Power 5 quarterback in college football, and he's still putting up the numbers that he's putting up. The kid's got 1,300 yards in 3 games. We can talk about that later. Right.
That's insane.
Yeah, that's crazy, particularly that he's got 11 sacks. But moving on, we have a sponsor here at As for Football on the round table, and we have Buyer Barn. We have a sponsor here. BuyerBarn.com is co-founded by class of 97 graduate Dan Robinson. Dan ran a traditional farm co-op for many, many years, and he realized that there was a way to bring it into the 21st century. So he and his co-founder, Dinu, took their experience in IT management and development and built the world's first farm-to-farm online auction and sales platform. Buyer Barn reduces health issues through reduced animal and owner contact, reduced animal fraud through a buyer and rater selling system, a fully integrated auction platform with secure payments, convenience to buy and sell in your own time, and better market pricing because of a wider audience. So, Buyer Barn is dedicated to helping the small farmers in America and is providing a special military discount to all military veterans who want to assist them in the small family farm revolution. Go to buyerbarn.com or email them at info@buyerbarn.com. Be on the lookout for the featured cow of the week. That'll be popping up on the socials around Thursday or Friday. And there's also another midweek award that comes out with Craig Oxane, but we will talk about that at another time. Dano, let's break down the service academies.
Well, starting with the best going first, Army beat UTSA 37-29. We're going to talk about that in great detail tomorrow on the Army Football Show. I cannot wait. That was an amazing game. I mean, everything that could have gone right went right for the Black Knights. Plus, they ran the crap out of the football. Air Force won big against Utah State, 39-21. The game wasn't even as close as that score makes it sound like it could have been. Utah State was horrible. I mean, they were just god-awful. Air Force passing game was nominal with Zach Larrier. I hope I said that right. 3 of 4 for 84 yards. Zoomies had 64 rushing attempts for 344 yards and 5 touchdowns. Freaking insane. Navy lost a surprisingly competitive game to Memphis. Ty Lavatai actually looked good at quarterback. He was 10 of 13 for 133 yards and a touchdown. Alex Texa, how do you say that?
I think it's Teska.
Teska, thank you, is a weapon for the mids, 163 yards rushing and a touchdown. Their fullback play in general is really good, but, miscues, penalties. Yeah, their running game looks way better since week 0, but they got another bye week this week. So whatever they got out of playing in week 0, they've now given back in bye weeks. Really don't understand that scheduling philosophy. And then finally, Coast Guard Academy won a close one against Nichols, 49-42. They're at Springfield on the 23rd of September. And the Merchant Marine Academy plays also on the 23rd of September against SUNY Maritime. So that's a big games for both those teams.
Yeah, so we're going to dive into the top 10, and then we'll end it with Joe's Blue Falcon of the week. But Joe, who you got on the top 10 right now?
All right, Georgia stays put. Close game with South Carolina. Michigan stays put. Throttles beat Bowling Green in the second half. Texas puts it on Wyoming 21 points. Florida State had a very close game at BC. They're at number 4. I apologize for not saying these numbers. USC State is at number 5 after throttling Stanford 56-10. Ohio State is at 6 after beating Western Kentucky by 7,000 points. Penn State goes on a very good road test. They stay at number 7 after beating Illinois 30-13. Washington came in and throttled Michigan State 41-7. They're at number 8. And then Notre Dame's at number 9 after beating Central Michigan, and Oregon is at number 10 after whooping up on Hawaii.
Yeah. So notable drops in the top 10, like Bama fell off hard. So they dropped from 10 to 13, which is crazy. And Tennessee got the black eye of the week, man. They went minus 12 in the rankings. So they dropped.
They looked awful.
They dropped.
I mean, they just looked awful.
23. Yeah. It was like they hadn't played football before. Like, what is going on? Did they send them like some bad shellfish or something to the hotel?
Tennessee and UTSA have the same problem. When you run that hurry up offense and you go 3 and out and the other team is running the football, suddenly you've been sitting on the sidelines for 15 minutes. And dude, it was so ugly. I mean, I love that tempo that they use, but when that thing doesn't work, you are totally screwed.
Yeah.
And you kill your defense.
Absolutely.
They're just pulling for air that they can't find.
Yeah, that's true. And then, of course, CU dropped from 18 to 19 in the top 25, and that was the last movement. But again, that was a super close game. Like, hats off to them. Just interesting. Top 25 upsets this week. So we had 9 upsets so far in the 2023 53 season. It's going to be worse than that. I think last year it was like 58 or 63, something like that. And I didn't count the bowl games. So that was after the regular season. So you're going to see a lot more movement again in the top 25. Like, how about them Kansas State Wildcats? That walk-off 61-yard field goal. Like, that's something out of a movie, man. Like,
that was awesome. That was an awesome kick.
Yeah, it was great kick. And the fact that there was no time left, and like, if you're the opposing team and you're watching that thing and you're just hoping that it hits the upright, and like, there was not a chance. And it was like, wow, great kick. And then, of course, we've already belabored the point, but I don't see a team that is well coached and as hyped up as Tennessee just crumbling when they got to Florida. Like, the swamp is not, I mean, obviously it is for Tennessee. I think that's the 20th straight game that they've lost in the swamp. So they got their work cut out for you down there.
Look,
but
it starts with the QB and it ends with the QB. And Joe Milton has a great arm, but man, I saw him at Michigan. There's a reason he transferred. He wasn't going to play. And when he started at Tennessee, I thought maybe Tennessee's hurting for quarterbacks. And he's had 3 or 4 years of college football now. And some guys, the game just moves too fast for them. And I feel like that with Joe Milton. So it's going to be a tough one for Tennessee this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a talented guy. I think maybe the tempo offense may actually hurt him a little bit more than, some other guys. Some guys are good at tempo, some guys are not. And sadly, if you're the coach, you don't change the offense for a guy that's about to graduate. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and he's got a big pair of shoes to fill from Hendon Hooker.
Yeah, well, that too. Like, Hendon Hooker was a stud, so there's no getting around that. But
I mean, they just didn't have any running game, and it's everything went wrong. The offense just looked like garbage.
Yeah.
And then Florida steady running the football on the other side, and that was just a total mismatch. It was exactly the same thing that happened to UTSA happened at Tennessee. So yeah, it was ugly.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so moving on to Joe's Blue Falcon of the week. I know you thought about this, and of much wailing and gnashing of teeth. And if you guys don't know, if you didn't listen to the show last week, Mel Tucker is permanently in the Blue Falcon pantheon, so he will stay there forever until somebody does something worse than he did, which makes me scratch my head. But Joe, who is in the home of college football infamy this week?
Well, he can't, Mel can't be mad because we're sending him a guy who he probably knows. Mel left Colorado in the middle of the night, and this coach just got beat by Colorado in a hell of a game. And here's my problem with Norvell. Okay. One, he dismantled Nevada when he left for Colorado State, and Colorado State was a dumpster fire. Everyone, including myself, who lost on the pick, took Colorado to win by 3 scores. Okay, your kids played their butts off. There were no losers out there that night. Nobody lost face in that game whatsoever. Colorado State should have been proud of themselves. And after the game, what does he do? Phantom calls, blaming the refs. It's because of Prime. Like, dude, don't do that. You take away from your kids. You take away from the fact that you guys just about beat the team that just throttled the national runner-up in Texas. And I just, to me, for a head coach, it looks weak to start complaining about the referees. So all I'm saying is take your L like a man. You guys played your butts off. You went into overtime with Colorado, who was favored by 21, and it didn't go your way. You don't see me going crazy, missing the show over what the refs did to the Lions yesterday, do you? Neither here nor there. Neither here nor there. But you're a millionaire to not have those meltdowns with a microphone and 200 people in the room writing down what you say. So, Norvell, do better. That's all I'm going to say. So you're not wearing the deep shade of blue that Mel is, but you're more of a Carolina Blue Falcon. But you took away from your team. You just barely got beat. You got beat by 1 score in overtime. Take it as a learning loss where your team showed up, and be proud because you played them tougher than the national runner-up did. So yeah, is it Dan? It's Dan Norvell, isn't it?
I think it's Jay.
Well, he's going by Norvell from here on out. Anyways, you jump in that two-seater with Mel because you guys are riding down the Falcon Highway. All right, that's all I got.
Yeah. So again, I think that
At least his moral compass is straight, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, you made a really good point, Joe. And one of the things that we all have to account for is, I say this all the time, and I think this is one of the things that was, pounded into me as a player, and then as a guy who watches football and loves the game. Like, never put yourself in a position where a bad call could make the difference in the game. Right? That's the first part. Like, if you're stomping somebody by like 40 points and there's a bad call, who cares? Right? Nobody cares because you're winning. Or you're losing so badly that like the call is going to be irrelevant. And, ironically, working on getting a referee who does high school and D2 and D3 football on the show so we can talk about officiating, right? And one of the things that he had mentioned is they have to write up a report for every flag that they throw. So if I throw a flag, I got to justify it. And if I don't justify it, then I'm putting myself in a position where, I'm going to be under scrutiny. And we've all seen it in other sports. Like, we're watching the UFC. We saw what happened with Chris Taioni this weekend. Makes a super early call, and it was really, really bad. Right? Everybody's going to be booing that guy for the rest of the time that he's employed by the UFC. And that's the same thing with referees in any professional sport or any college level sport. If they're not good at their job, people are going to be like, I don't like that guy. I hope he's not calling my game. Right? And that's what you don't want. And I think for a coach to use that as an excuse, it was like, hey, look, they played hard. They whooped our butts. Like, oh, by the way, we did give them some free yardage because we cheap shot at their best player on the sidelines unnecessarily. Like, and that wasn't even one of those like in the pile kind of, people were scrapping around kind of thing. Like, literally the dude was on the sidelines and you blasted him. And it's
that kid is like another son to Dion. Did you hear him crying?
Yeah. Right.
He said it was a violent and ugly injury. He wasn't calling names or conspiracy. He just said it was violent and the injury was ugly.
Yeah. And so I think there's something to be said about, people that can just take it on the chin and move on. And it's not a good thing to do in front of your players, particularly in I guess if you're in the locker room and you're having that discussion, and like somebody hears it, okay, whatever. But if you're in the press conference post game, like you just played one of the most hot football teams in the country and took them into double overtime, like you literally could walk in and be like, hey, it didn't go our way, but we played our asses off. Like, and
yeah, up until then, I was a fan of what he'd said on the mic. We're looking forward to playing them. Okay, let's see if you back it up. Then you back it up. Their coach is going on 60 Minutes the next night. They are the hottest team in football. You took them to overtime. Be proud, man. It's the last thing I want to see is Jim Harbaugh going, man, we can't catch a break. It's like, I wouldn't want to see that. So I don't know. I think it invokes excuses. And I don't know about you, but have you ever beaten somebody that you didn't know if you could beat them or not, and they shook your hand and said, hey, I'll see you again later in the season?
Yeah.
I was terrified to see them again if they acted like, crap.
Yeah, that's fair.
Right. It's a competitor,
Yeah. So, and that kind of leads us right into our topic today. And that topic is, do coaches actually matter? So we're watching this across the pantheon of college football. Everybody gets excited now. And I think, honestly, we've seen a lot more excitement with, Deion Sanders moving from Jackson to Jacksonville State or Jackson. I can't even remember now.
It's Jackson. You're right.
Yeah, to Jackson to Colorado, right? So he moves to Colorado, and now that he's in Colorado, everybody's talking about coaches and the impacts that coaches have on the game. And everybody all of a sudden now cares what the coach is doing, right? Like, oh my gosh, Coach Prime is doing this and Coach Prime is doing that. But at the end of the day, he's not coaching any differently than he did when he was at the other school. He just has more eyeballs on it. And fortunately for Deion Sanders, he has a reputation of being able to produce both content and on the field. And so now everybody's interested in what he's doing. But there's other teams like Nick Saban, like what's going on with Bama? They basically almost killed themselves. Like, and this is one of those wins that didn't feel like a win, like Bama, like, yeah, on the scoreboard, they won, but if you watch that game, like for basically 3/4, you're like, what is going on in Tuscaloosa?
That offensive line looks god awful. I mean, they just look horrible. And USF is not some world beaters. It's just that they got some problems. Like that is
Yeah.
bad.
He's getting beat on the recruiting trail by Kirby for the first
Yeah.
time.
Just Kirby. I mean,
Kirby's getting the hogs, and I think that he probably lost a few guys to the NFL, and he it's like we talked about last week. Every once in a while, you miss on a recruit. Alabama hadn't missed in like 15 years. You know, they were due. I think they're, like Dano said, I think their offensive line is suspect for the first time in a long time. And that's going to be like that. You know, it's going to be like watching Mike Tyson go down.
Yeah.
Excuse
That's
my
fair.
alarm.
But we've also seen, you know, look at what UConn has been able to do. Nobody thought that, you know, UConn.
Oh, dude, they look terrible this year. They got blasted by Florida International just this past weekend. And
well, that's what I'm saying. Like, we're riding the wave with UConn because, like, last year, everybody was like, "Oh, these guys are going to be in the postseason and running the table," you know, and it didn't happen. They got close, but now
I mean,
it's like,
UConn Nation just on Twitter is they have completely melted down. They're 0-3, and it's tough because they looked competitive against NC State, and don't get me wrong, I think Florida International's got a really legit running game this year, and that's why they beat UConn. But the Huskies defense has no answers right now against the running game.
Yeah, but that's the thing is, like, you look at these guys, and one of the things I also, you know, take note of is it's not just the head coach, it's position coach.
Yeah.
Right. It's position coaches. And like, we can have a much broader discussion about this, you know, on the Army football show, but look at what the progression, and we can talk about this because it is college football news. Coach Monken just signed an extension to stay at Army for a little bit longer. Right. I think St. Jeffrey Monken is going to be like the Dan Snyder of, you know, Army football, and I'll be okay with that. If he wants to stay there till he's 80, take a couple years off and then come back, as long as they keep winning, who cares, right? But the reality of it is like, it's all the other position players that the coaches bring in around them, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of the success of, you know, Ohio State or Michigan for all those years is coaches knowing when to say, okay, I really like this guy. He's been on my team for a decade, but I got to let him go. One, because it's given him an opportunity to go somewhere else, but I can also bring in a younger guy that can connect with the players better. And like we saw the turn in Michigan, like Michigan was like, you know, for the last 2 years, before the last 2 years, what did everybody say? Well, Michigan can't get past Ohio State. They can't get past Ohio State. They can't get past Ohio State. They're never going to make it into the national championship picture. And then what happens? They beat OSU twice, and then they make it into the playoff. And part of that was a significant coaching change underneath Jim Harbaugh. And so the coaches have to be smart enough to say, hey, look, there's enough skilled dudes out there that I can snag up that can connect with these players that are a little bit more modern and still get there. Like, I think legitimately, like, there's only one coach in college football that's saying, like, hey, I'm an old school coach, and that's Deion Sanders. Like, hey, I'm going to get in your face. I'm going to dig in your ass. And he won't say it that way, but I'm going to get in your case, and I'm going to coach you the way that I was coached as a player, and that's what's going to get you to achieve success.
I think you have something with a positional coach there, because, you know, I was watching the Lions game with my parents, and I'm like, look at this. There's a tight end from Iowa starting here and a tight end from Iowa starting there. And my mom says, who was the tight end last year? I said, TJ Hawkinson. She goes, where'd he play? I go, Iowa. I mean, is Iowa national champions every year? No, but they turn out tight ends that go to the NFL every freaking year, sometimes two. Because Noah Fant and Sam Laporta were both on the field in the game. TJ Hawkinson's one of the top ones in the league. I mean, they just keep on cranking these guys out. So whoever it is that's coaching that position knows how to communicate to these kids. I mean, it's why Penn State was linebacker U.
Yep.
And the difference on why Michigan's winning now is your, once again, your favorite position. They're getting the linemen they weren't getting 5 years ago.
Yeah.
That's it. Because running the ball wins the game in the fourth quarter in a close game.
Yeah. And think about, you know, sticking with the Big Ten for a second, look at the talent that Ohio State has in their wide receiver room year after year after year. Is number
Smith
one.
and Jigma was on that field also.
Yeah.
And he made a difference.
Like, you've got guys that are coming in those coaches are doing a great job at bringing in that talent and recruiting, and like literally their highlight reels from their players, speak for themselves. Like all you got to do is show this guy catching balls in, whatever respective college team it is, and then it fades to black, and then he's catching balls in the NFL. Like, hey, if you want to be a wide receiver in the NFL, come to our program, right? It makes it super simple to do that when you have that reputation, like you said, with the tight ends, like you said, with offensive linemen. It's like we're getting to the point where position coaches are probably just as important or more important than the head coach, because when you think about recruiting, particularly in college football, those are the guys that are hitting the street and talking to a lot of those players to kind of convince them, like, hey, here's the reason why you need to come to our school.
Yeah, that's why I was so bummed out when Michigan lost Tyrone Wheatley as their running backs coach. They were putting guys in the NFL left and right at tailback, and Michigan's not predominantly a running back to the NFL type of school. And now who's coaching the running backs? Jay Harbaugh. No offense, but you're not Tyrone Wheatley. Okay.
Yeah.
And when Wheatley was coaching the backs, they all went, those guys were going to the league and they were playing. So,
yeah. Dano, you got some thoughts? What are you thinking?
Yeah, man. What I thought this weekend was that this was the week I realized how badly we all overreacted to week one, because now that we're a little deeper into the season and you can sort of tell what's really what. And, just talking about sort of how people adjust to things that are and aren't happening in the season. For one, I was like amazed at how South Carolina could sort of hold up against Georgia and make that, a game, and how Spencer Rattler suddenly looks like a legit quarterback, which is a thing that I don't think I've ever really thought before. And yeah, I don't know. Obviously coaching matters. It's just, you're seeing teams that are good teams sort of adapt and get into the flow, and teams that maybe aren't as good as we wanted them to be sort of going by the wayside. And, this is why, everybody says, oh, Georgia, they didn't really look like the world beaters, but they played a divisional foe in the second half. They looked like they might be world beaters. Like, I don't know, man. It's kind of an interesting week. I don't know. I sort of took it on the chin though, in terms of how our picks league was going. So what do I know?
That's okay, Dano. We got some serious competition coming this week. There's no search for good games come Saturday, because
that's true.
It's getting real now.
Yeah.
Well, and everybody, I don't know. I guess maybe it was a bunch of trap games, or who knows, but it was a wild week this past week, and I'm looking forward to seeing who's sort of real this week.
Yeah, I legitimately think, the transfer portal is bringing parity, and you're starting to see it, because like now it's funny. Like I chuckled when I heard like, oh, this kid's a transfer from Colorado. Oh, he was one of the kids that got booted, and like you laugh about it, but the reality of it is like the dude was a talented player. He just didn't fit the system. And like I watched the 60 Minutes interview with Deion Sanders, and Deion was basically like, I came in and I told these guys, like, look, I fired all the coaches. And so because I fired all the coaches, I had to get rid of all the players that those coaches recruited, because the vast majority of those guys were recruited for a team that just wasn't winning. And
ouch.
like
Life hurts.
I mean, it is what it is. It's the truth.
Yep.
He wasn't wrong.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, like, look, he's won exactly 2 more games than they won last year, right? If they go 6-6 and get to a bowl game this season, that's pretty damn impressive for a team that won 1 game last year, And oh, by the way, until they take the loss, Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, and depending on how bad his injury is, both of those guys are going to be, in the hunt for the Heisman.
Yeah.
Up until they take, like, unless they take if they take a brutal loss against Oregon, maybe the story changes. But if it's like a track meet, like Army Wake Forest a couple years ago, where there was like a basketball score at the end of the game, like if he throws 4 or 5 touchdowns and no picks and they just get outscored, like people will still be talking about like, oh, look at the valiant effort in a losing effort or whatever. And so again, like, look, freaking Caleb Williams won the Heisman and he lost twice to the same guy. So it's like we've got to start accounting for that in college football. And I think there's going to be some interesting things. But speaking of accounting, we got a commercial that we need to get into, and Dano is the person to do the read. So how do I like that segue?
Craig Oxane, Vice President of Residential Lending for Draper and Kramer in Chicago. As you guys know, Craig is a member of the West Point class of 1994, licensed to lend in all 50 states, but based out of Chicago. He is one of the biggest VA lenders in the country. Friends, Craig is going to give you the best deal he possibly can, including super competitive rates. And what's a little more important than that, because you're going to sort of get rates from whoever at whatever rate they are, is getting somebody that you can trust, right? This whole mortgage process is very confusing. Like, interest rates moving all over the place, and people are just trying to get whatever they can get off you. That's why you want to go with somebody who cares about you, somebody that you can trust. And that's Craig, right? He's an actual person, not a call center, not some big box bank, not some mindless website. This is how the West Point network functions, right? Craig is helping us stay in business here at As for Football, and we're trying to introduce you to the best person that you can meet if you're looking for a mortgage. So Craig doesn't charge lending fees for veterans. It's going to save you about $1,300 on your mortgage. So if you're looking to buy a house, friend, Craig Oxane, Vice President of Residential Lending from Draper and Kramer, is going to set you up with the best deal that he possibly can. And most importantly, he's going to be a person that you can trust as you go through this very confusing process. His link's on our website. Just go to asforfootball.com, find the little spot, where the little link, fill out a little questionnaire. You'll be talking to him in a couple of hours. That's it.
Thanks, Dan. All right, so we're moving to the games of the week. All right, again, football on Thursday. How awesome is that? You got college football that kind of offset with your pro football watching if you are that kind of a fan. Georgia State and Coastal Carolina, they kick at 7:30. That'll be an interesting matchup. I mean, what we've started to see is these teams that had like big time transfers come out, they aren't doing as well. Like, I didn't realize how emaciated the Wake Forest offense was until, Sam Hartman went to Notre Dame, right? Like, you don't realize how good that guy actually was until he ends up somewhere else.
Oh yeah, they look seriously mid without him.
Yeah, like they went from being an elite team, at least in the ACC, to a middle of the pack team very, very quickly. All right, Friday matchup starting at 7:00. You got Wisconsin, Purdue, NC State, and Virginia, Boise State and San Diego State kick at 10:30, and then you've got Air Force at San Jose State for your nightcap on Friday, and both of those games kick at 10:30. Saturday in the big noon kickoff, Oklahoma against Cincinnati. I am sorry, Cincy, you are going to get punished. You've got Florida State and Clemson. That should be an interesting game just based off of the way that Florida State played this past week. I don't know, is Jaden Daniels back? Because he looked like he was pretty banged up at the end of the first half, and they did not look like they recovered from him getting knocked out of the game at the beginning of the first half. So we'll see what happens with that one. I think Clemson will Clemson, but it may be closer than the experts think. Got Western Kentucky licking their wounds against Troy. That should be an interesting future Army opponent. You got Virginia Tech at Marshall. Hey, we are Marshall. That's a great that should be a great game just because Marshall always has a surprise in their back pocket for anyone. Then you've got in the noon window on the ACC network, for those of you guys that are not local or do not have ESPN Plus or some cable package that supports it, Army at Syracuse. So you got Army going to the Dome. I think that'll be an interesting game. Syracuse has looked good. Army has looked better.
Great.
Yeah, and Army
Syracuse looked freaking outstanding against Purdue. Holy smokes.
Yeah, and Army has looked better. But the other part of it is Purdue is kind of stinking it up right now. So I don't know if it's a talent-rich environment at Syracuse or if it was because Purdue is just bad. They are not wearing their spoiler maker hats just yet. They have to get about 4 or 5 more games in before they start ruining everybody else's season. But you got Auburn and Texas A&M kicking on ESPN at noon, Kentucky and Vanderbilt. You got Rutgers at Michigan. That should be a drubbing, like the Wolverine.
Careful now.
Yeah,
Careful
Rutgers
now.
is better this year.
Rutgers is sneaky.
Yeah, well, again, Rutgers is kind of like Purdue. Like, they occasionally put together a good game early in the season, and they'll bump off one of the big powerhouses. I think I was talking to a buddy of mine who's a Penn State fan. Not that we're getting to their game yet, but I was saying, Penn State might become part of the elite in the Big Ten after all the new teams come in and they do the scramble and they don't play each other every year. Because Penn State, they get brutalized in that schedule because they usually go pretty well up until the point where they have Ohio State by Michigan, and then they usually will drop one or both of those games. And so I think when the schedules start getting revamped because of the new teams in the Big Ten, I think Penn State will actually become one of the elites in the conference just by the virtue of not having to play their habitual, landmines season after season. You got Kentucky and Vanderbilt. Vandy's actually good. I got to tip the cap to those guys. I talked a little smack on them earlier in the year. They're actually looking pretty solid. We'll see. SMU at TCU. Like, again, that's a game for Texas. Like, if you're a Texas fan, like, that's a good college football contest for them. Moving on, you got Ohio at Bowling Green. Ohio looked pretty good this past weekend, so we'll see if they can match up well against Bowling Green. Bowling Green is actually a decent team. They've just played some outstanding competition up until this point. You got Miami at Temple. That one's like, hey, when is Miami going to Miami? Unfortunately, like, they have always been able to put like 5 or 6 wins really good early in the season, and then just kind of comes off in the middle, and then they kind of tighten it up towards the end. We'll see what happens there. You got BYU and Kansas. That's a actual Big 12 matchup now because BYU has moved to the Big 12, and we'll see how that goes. Boston College and Louisville. Like, I don't know, man. That one seems like a toss-up to me. I don't know what the line is on that game, but that one looks a little bit more interesting, particularly given the way that BC played against Florida State. Like, they made it ugly and they kept it close, and so that puts them in a good position. Again, I wouldn't say they'll beat Louisville, but the good chance to cover. Ranked on ranked matchup right now, you've got UCLA and Utah playing. That's going to be at the 3:30 game on Fox, and then that's followed up by Oregon and Colorado. That one's going to be a shootout. Do not sit your drink down. I would say there's at least going to be 100 points scored in that game. Like, I'm looking like 55 to 60 something. And I don't know who's.
I hear they're actually pronouncing it Oregon and Colorado because there will be no D in that game.
Oof, ouch.
None.
Ouch.
Not a bit.
Ouch.
I'm taking a blind over.
Yeah.
If it's 99, I'm taking the over.
Yeah, I would venture a guess that the over on that game is going to be interesting. Ole Miss and Alabama, like, that one's going to be.
Oh yeah.
That was going to be a much better game. I literally thought Georgia Tech would have a little bit more for Ole Miss, and Ole Miss just wiped the floor with them, like, straight up. Ole Miss is good this season. They're looking pretty good. And an opener against the wounded Alabama, like, if I watch that game film, I'm blitzing every play if I'm the defensive coordinator.
They got a problem.
Yeah, their offensive line is horrible, and they're going to get beat pretty bad. You've got New Mexico and UMass. Like, I don't know if UMass is going to be able to pull themselves out of the nosedive that they're in right now. They are not looking good. I believe they're 0-3 as well. And, like, if you've got a U in front of you, whether that be UConn or UMass, you got your work cut out for you for the rest of the season. You got Maryland against Michigan State. Baby Tua is going to smack Michigan State around. They've got too much off the field antics to worry about. Louisiana Tech and Nebraska, they may actually win that game. Nebraska is, man, I don't know what to say. Like, Matt Rule is supposedly this great coach that can turn places around. Like, I'm not seeing it happening in Nebraska. He may be able to do it in his next job, but he's definitely not doing it for the Huskers. You got Duke at UConn. Oof, that would be a much better basketball contest. However, given the fact that Duke is playing pretty good games this season, I think that one will be a travesty amongst travesties. Texas Tech and West Virginia, that should be a good one coming out of the backyard brawl. West Virginia is looking better. Coaches on the hot seat. We talked about that in the offseason show. Coaches got to win. Like, everybody in the college football pantheon, particularly the West Virginia fans, are on Coach Brown's case. Like, you have to win some football games or you're going to lose your job. And I think it's a foregone conclusion. If West Virginia doesn't make it to a bowl, I think he's going bye-bye. Oklahoma State and Iowa State, that one should be interesting just because, Iowa State is usually a pretty good team, and these are in the 4 o'clock window. UTSA at Tennessee, that's going to be a battle of interesting no huddle offenses, right? Because, like, Joe Milton, can he get it done? UTSA, again, after watching the Army game, I will say they have flashes of brilliance. They have some great role players that can break loose in space. But if Tennessee's defense doesn't show up, you're going to see it's going to be a track meet. Like, these guys
is Trey Moore coming back for UTSA, their linebacker? Because when he went out, Army went crazy.
Yeah, I have no idea. But, like, that dude, like, that guy was like the cornerstone of the defense.
Yeah.
And like I said, the difference is, like, if you watch the Army game, and we'll talk about this, we'll deep dive it, but the reality of it is explosive plays over 35 yards was really the difference as far as UTSA scoring. they have some talented guys that if they break loose in space, they're going to get 40, 50 yards on you if they get open, And that was the thing is like they had the backup quarterback in. Right now, it does not look like Frank Harris is going to be doing anything other than holding the clipboard, standing on the sidelines in his Chinese jump boot. So advantage Tennessee, at least personnel-wise, but it doesn't mean that they can put the game together. Got Central Michigan and South Alabama. Let's see. Got to call out Garner Webb since we mentioned them last week. They're playing East Carolina at 6 on ESPN+. Oregon State and Washington State. So you got the Cougs and the Beavers. That'll be a good game at 7. That's a Pac-12 game that's actually coming on in prime time for just about everybody. That one will be a good one. Colorado has a chance to lick their wounds. They're taking on Middle Tennessee State. Let's see. You got Sam Houston and Houston playing. That's basically a hometown game for both of those guys. So Charlotte at Florida. That's going to be on SEC Nation Plus and ESPN Plus. There are a lot of games that are moving to ESPN Plus. Basically, the entire MAC and most of most of the Big 12 games are going to be in there as well. And like the Pac-12 network, why does this thing still exist? I don't understand that. You got Arizona and Stanford, probably because both of those teams are not the best, and that's why they put them on a Pac-12 network because nobody cares. You got App State and Wyoming. Hey, I don't care if you're a fan of either one of those teams. Watch that game. I think that one will be a good one just because those guys are great teams. You got Arkansas and LSU. I mean, LSU is winning, but LSU's statement game was against Florida State, and they missed their opportunity. I think like their season is basically a wrap. Even if they run the table in the rest of the division, nobody's going to care what LSU is doing. Contrary to what last year was, they built momentum towards the end. They had their black eye early, and I just don't think they're coming back from it. You got Iowa and Penn State. That's going to be on CBS and Paramount Plus. Again, like the college football broadcast pattern is coming as erratic as the conference realignment. So that's going to be a crazy one. Of course, your NBC late evening kick is going to be Notre Dame and Ohio State. That'll be on Peacock.
Oh, yeah.
And the Buckeyes are playing at Touchdown Jesus. Hey, look, that one's going to be a good game just for the simple fact that Ohio State woke up this week. Granted, it was against Western Kentucky, but they put some points on the board. Like you had running backs going off. You had, Marvin Harrison Jr. going off. It's going to be an interesting game. Here's one that doesn't make any sense and nobody cares. UAB versus Georgia. Like, what is going on with Georgia's schedule? Like
40-point spread in week 4.
Do we know? Like, I'm just not sure of why these things are happening.
Is it their fault that South Carolina's in their division? I mean, they played a divisional game last week.
Yeah.
My issue is the going into the division, then coming back and playing a cupcake. I get why they do it, but nobody else does it, and so it makes it weird. It's like, oh, Georgia just faced South Carolina. See if they tighten the screws and get it right next week against UA. Well, it doesn't matter. It's UAB. Doesn't matter, guys. So they're a 41-point favorite right now.
Yeah.
So
that's madness. You got Texas and Baylor again. That one's going to be a drubbing. Hey, Baylor is I wouldn't even say they're in a rebuilding year. They're struggling big time.
Yeah, they're rough.
North Carolina and Pitt. That should be an interesting game. Got UCF and Kansas State. Kansas State's got to bounce back, but they got to play the informal 2017 national champions. And the last ranked matchup is California versus Washington. Hey, Michael Penix Jr. is for real, man. Like, when are we going to start?
Man.
Like, when are we going to start handing that kid some helmet stickers? Because he's crushing it. I mean, that move to Washington was probably one of the smarter ones in college football because it shows. I mean, I think he's in the Heisman discussion. I don't think he's doing as well or as popular as some of the other cats, but I think he's doing a good job. And of course, you got USC at Arizona State at 10:30. Who really cares? And then the last one is New Mexico State and Hawaii at Hawaii. And their kickoff is at 11:59 p.m. So that is a actual Sunday game. Because by the time you get through all the pregame festivities,
that's so awful.
Yeah, somebody's cashing a check on that one, man, and somebody's getting a vacation, on the Big Island. Who knows? But any games of note that you guys really, really want to watch this weekend? I'll pause there. Hey, Dano, you go first, and then you, Joe.
Oklahoma at Cincy. I think the Sooners have got to be one of the most underrated, most consistent teams in college football right now that nobody's really talking about. We talked a little bit about Colorado at Oregon. FSU at Clemson. I still kind of think the Noles struggled with the trap game this past week. I'll bet they show up this week. And finally, Ohio State at Notre Dame. Joel Klatt said today on his show that was for the, quote, number 2 spot in the country. So I think that's an interesting game, and we'll see what happens.
Joe, how about you?
Yeah, they're going to make us wait for the big one. But even as a Michigan fan, and true Buckeye fans will agree with me on this one silently. But when your rival's playing a huge game against another one of your rivals, you're watching. And I will be checking that game out. So Ohio State against Notre Dame. I think Ohio State comes out and wins money line. I don't think they cover. They're 3.5-point favorites right now. But then Iowa and Penn State is 2 ranked teams, even though Iowa is wearing the number 25. But going to Penn State, their defense has been solid. Both teams, somebody's always got to go. Rutgers and Michigan's going to be a good test for J.J. McCarthy and Michigan's offense to see if they can put it together against an undefeated team. And then we've got Colorado and Oregon. We've got Ole Miss and Bama. We've got FSU and Clemson. There's only one loss out of all those 6 teams, and it's Clemson's. So there's going to be a lot of undefeated teams that are no longer after, come Sunday morning. So, yeah, all those games I listed, I'm going to be swapping back and forth because I don't have the sweet, super high-tech setup like Colonel Rob does yet.
Yeah. Hey, I tried it, and it was by advice. But hey, either way, I think watching those games are going to be interesting. Georgia State and Coastal, I'll watch that because it'll be the only thing on. Wisconsin and Purdue, man. I'm waiting to see when the spoiler makers kick in because they do it every year. Like they'll have a stretch of like 3 or 4 games where they're just trouncing people. I think Wisconsin showed up last week. The week before it was kind of shaky, and then definitely the week before that it was not so good for them. I think Luke Fickell has got the defense turned around, and that's why the games are a little bit closer, or actually they played a little bit better because the defense was actually able to keep people out of the end zone. Offense is coming along. They're steadily improving. Like to see what he's doing down there. Air Force and San Jose State, I'll peek in on that one. FSU and Clemson, of course. I want to see if FSU can kind of turn around because like that look against Boston College like does not pass the eye test. If you're trying to win the national championship, like everybody's been saying, then they are seriously going to have to step it up this week, and we'll see. All right, so let's pause for weekly locks.
Weekly locks.
All right, who are we picking this week? Dano, you're up.
I went 0-3 last week. Like I said, it was miserable. Plus, I dropped a 4th or 5th on our bandwagon sports thing. But I'm still taking Oklahoma minus 13.5 at Cincy. I already said they were overrated or underrated. I can't believe I'm saying this. So I'll also take Florida State minus 1.5 at Clemson. I think they were looking ahead. I really do. And finally, Western Kentucky at Troy under 57.5. 57.5 is a lot of points, and Troy's defense is good, and I don't think that they can get on the scoreboard. So there you go.
Yeah, that's fair. Joe, how about you?
All right, gentlemen, you're going to have to forgive me because Georgie, the little guy, is not happy in the background.
He's doing his Jay Norvell.
I'm going to go ahead.
All right.
And
it's all right.
You're right. Sounds like Jay Norvell on the microphone after reviewing the game. Listen, when I pick locks and they're around a Michigan game, I picked Bowling Green last week. They were plus 40. Okay, they covered 24 points. So I'm taking Rutgers plus 24 points. I think Michigan wins by 2 scores, and it comes late, like 31-21. So Rutgers plus 24. Dano has picked my brain for the rest of them, but I'm taking FSU to cover that line. And the Sharps agree with Dano on this one because the FSU line has already moved to 2. So people are picking them. And then Oklahoma's line has already moved to 14.5.
Wow.
This team has won games by 49 and 73 this year.
Yeah.
Okay. They had a close one against SMU where they won by 17, but they're covering that 14.5. Then I like Colorado plus 21 at Oregon. I think they hang in tough enough with an Oregon team Maybe they lose. I'm not betting that game money line or picking it one way or the other, but I do like Colorado on the points.
All right, that's fair. Yeah, what I'll say on the Colorado game, I legitimately think here's the thing that I've noticed about Bo Nix. Like when the defense is playing well and he gets to stay on the field in like tempo or in rhythm, he's going to be okay. But the problem is there's this like it's going to be a track meet. So you're going to see, some very quick possessions, and when you get those quick possessions, what we've seen from Bo Nix, there's a reason why he transferred out of Auburn because he couldn't get it done under pressure, right? So he went to Oregon. And when you start looking at these quarterbacks, when they start turning over points a lot faster, somebody's going to make a mistake because they're going to be pressuring because it's like, hey, look, we got to keep this game close. And then somebody's going to make a bad decision. So I think that game is, like Joe said, it'll be closer than the experts think. But my picks this week, I went 2-1 last week. I hit on SC in the Georgia game, which they covered. Florida State and BC barely hit the over. And then I missed on UNC and Minnesota. But here's what I will say. So I'm taking Ole Miss to cover 6.5 against Bama. My gut is telling me they're going to beat them outright, like by at least 10. Unless Bryce Young comes back to Alabama, they're screwed for the rest of the season. #prime to Bama. Moving on. Take the Buffaloes to cover 20.5 against Oregon. I'm feeling the same way. If you're feeling bold, take the over. Like not even like you're taking the over on this. I think they're going to score 100 points between both those teams. But I'm not sure if Travis Hunter is going to be playing this week. But if there's prop,
I think they already ruled him out, didn't they?
Yeah, I think so. But if there's a prop bet on how many TDs that the tight end catches, you might want to entertain that because Shedeur Sanders fell in love with his tight end this past week. And take Texas to cover 14.5. They're going to hang 100 on them. Like that's pretty easy. I mean, they've got a pretty not so great team playing against them. So my picks are Ole Miss to cover 6.5, Buffalo's to cover 20.5, and Texas to cover minus 14.5. All right, so moving on to bandwagon sports update. Matt is still on top with 46. I'm in second place, tied with Dave G and Dano, but the tiebreaker is the home win, so I'm on top. Because of that, I'm officially in second place. And like Dan said, the home wins actually carry a little bit more weight as far as the scoring system is concerned. And there's a three-way tie or two-way tie between Zach and Joey, and they're tied for third. Again, bandwagon sports, it's fun. It's something that you could do. I don't know if you could start a league now because we're so deep into the season, but it makes it easy, much easier than fantasy sports. But you got to remember to make your adjustments after the lines move. So I'm talking like Thursday night before that final kickoff if you're going to make adjustments to your schedule. But this brings us to the end of the college football roundtable. So, hang with us for the rest of the season here at As for Football. We're going to be covering college football on the roundtable, and we'll be diving deep into the Army football coverage on the As for Football Army Football Show. Thanks again for joining us. We're always open for suggestions on what topics you guys want us to cover as we dive a little bit deeper into this. But thanks again for joining us here on the roundtable. And for Dano Ikebesa calling out of coastal Connecticut and Trigger Joe in the home of the Big House, I am Rob here at the Military Center of the Universe, and we will talk to you guys next time. Thanks.
Beat Syracuse.
Beat them. Thanks for listening to the Ask for Football College Football Roundtable. Tune in next week as the AFF team brings you more hot takes and college football analysis. We'd like to thank our sponsor, BuyerBarn.com. BuyerBarn.com is the world's first platform to perform online auctions and sales for farm animals. BuyerBarn.com is dedicated to helping small farmers in America and are extending a special discount to military veterans who want to help in the revolution of the family farm. Go to BuyerBarn.com/military. That's BuyerBarn.com, BYREBARN.com to learn more and to get started, or email them at info@BuyerBarn.com. Thanks again for listening to As for Football College Football Roundtable, and as always, beat Navy.